Welcome. We're David and Hillary, and this is our movie POSTview of the movie September 5. If you're new to our channel and you haven't seen movie reviews by us before or just want to have a moment of clarity, we do movie previews without spoilers, and we have a preview for September 5 on our YouTube channel, The David and Hillary Show. If you haven't seen the movie and you don't want spoilers, please go watch that. I think you'll find it useful. This is the post view. We're going to talk about everything, so there will be spoilers. Hillary, September 5, talk to me.
Well, in 1972, I was 2. Right. So I don't remember this event. And I was on the edge of my seat because I didn't know about it. And we don't like to research a lot before we go, right, because we want to see the movie the way you want us to see it. I was on the edge of my seat. I loved it. Mm-hmm. I do remember the 70s, and I thought they did great with the clothes, the cars, the hairstyles. I think there was a lot of smoking.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
Yeah, it's just all of it. And the footage was amazing. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. Well, I'm a little older, and I kind of feel like I almost remember this happening, but of course my parents were shielding me from any of the specifics. And I remember hearing it talked about occasionally through the years. I did not know the full story either. And so, like you said, we watched it without trying to look all of that up, and it was edge of your seat. This is the post view, so hopefully you've seen it. But when the movie started and they were showing clips from 1972 without trying to upscale it or whatever to today's standards, I was like, oh, this is gonna be a long movie because these clips are horrific.
Just like the quality of the footage.
They were terrible. But I think they did that on purpose just to kind of set the stage, and thankfully it didn't last too long. I did look it up. I thought that the current movie looked period correct, and that maybe they had shot it in film,
right? And
they did think about it, but when they really looked at all of their options, they said that the film was just too hard to work with because of all the things they can do today digitally. And so they didn't shoot it in 4K, they shot it in 8K, which is super high quality. But then that also gave them the most latitude to do whatever they wanted to do with it, and to kind of make it look period correct, but also at the same time a good clear image that, people are not going to be like, why are we sitting through this? So I thought they did that all really well.
Yeah, no, you're right. In the beginning, you saw that the real footage, and like, oh, okay, this is going to be long.
Like I'm watching this with fuzzy glasses.
Yeah, but the footage on the monitors was a combination of from the archives, and then the recreated shots, and I thought that was really good too.
Yeah, especially the Jim McKay's commentary was the actual footage, which was just made it extra poignant. I thought it was really good. Cinematographer Marcus Forderer addressed that and talked about, well, let me just read his quote. I wrote it down. Out of respect for the hostages' families, we didn't want to show any of the real hostages or terrorists. That was all reenacted with actors very precisely using the original footage to try to figure out the exact camera positions where the ABC team would have been. And so I just loved that, the respect for the survivors and for the human element, but also trying to make it as authentic as possible. And obviously, if you saw the movie, you know that there was nothing explicitly violent about what they showed, but it just to me was really respectful that they chose, well, we're going to recreate that so it's not the actual footage. So I like that.
Yeah, and really from the first time they hear the gunshots, they hear it in the distance and they're like, was that gunshots? So they don't really know what's happening.
At Olympics, I mean, you hear a starting gun at the track or whatever, but you don't expect that.
Yeah, I think somebody said, were they doing fireworks? Maybe they're doing fireworks. And actually, after having been to Israel, we know that gunshots do sound a lot like fireworks. So they're in real time, they're realizing something's happening, and now we're right here. But they're the sports team. They're not the regular news crew. And from the minute it starts, they realize, no, we want this story.
Yeah.
We're here. We want it. And yet it's the executives are trying to take it away from them immediately.
Yeah.
So that's part of the drama is, do they get to tell this story? And
yeah, I mean, you feel like you're there.
yeah.
I thought they did a great job of just putting you in Germany in this production facility where you're just a fly on the wall watching all the decisions happen in real time.
Yeah.
And
The acting
so
was
good.
so well done.
Yeah.
I mean, you really do feel like you're just watching the history. What you said something about the producer who went to New York.
Okay, so yeah, this is a little different. The director, Tim Feldbaum, set it up for John Magaro, who's the actor who plays Jeff. What was his last name? Jeff Mason, who was the producer. He was the one you saw kind of calling the shots. Go to this camera, do this, insert that. All right. So in real life, and I mean, it's all real life, but in current day, when they shot the movie, the director set it up for John Magaro, who plays Jeff, the producer, to spend 2 months in a New York sports studio to really understand how that business works. And Magaro said after those 2 months, he felt really comfortable playing that role. And I don't do that job. What do I know? But man, it looked authentic.
Yeah.
I just love how you feel like you're right there watching just a little bit of stuff that we've learned doing podcasts and doing movie reviews. That's a whole different world, but how they inserted segments and how they got lettering on the screen back in 1972 and their logo up in the corner. And I mean,
So much respect for the hard work that they did.
dude,
Really, with basically low tech
Yeah.
compared to what we have now. Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. One of the characters, well, actually, before I cover that, I loved how, again, once they realize this situation is unfolding in real time, right in front of them, they have to decide. They do get to keep the story, so they are not handing it over to the news team. The sports crew is going to handle this unfolding situation.
Yep.
They realize that Peter Jennings is in the Olympic Village, and he is actually has access to a balcony where the reporters can see what's happening. So they're trying to report on it live from the scene. But then they also, the character of Marianne, I don't think we've talked about her yet.
Right.
I loved her character.
Yeah.
In the beginning, you don't really realize, I mean, she's just doing her job. She's the local German interpreter who's working with ABC.
Yep.
And she's just off doing her own business, just interpreting whatever they give her. I think she's listening to reports and just letting them know, what things are being said. Mm-hmm. But as the movie progresses, she becomes super important.
Yeah. More and more important.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was, I like how they portrayed that and kind of built it to where she was a bigger and bigger part of everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Instantly promoted. And we're like, okay, yeah, we're going to need you all the time.
Yep.
Excuse me. At one point in the movie, again, because there's so much confusion, not everybody knows how important she is. And one of the higher ups is in the room and he's trying to get something done and thinking he's really important. And she walks in. He doesn't know who she is. And he just looks at her and says, "Hey, go get me a cup of coffee." To which she was like, okay. I mean, I don't think that's my job, but she does it.
She looks kind of annoyed, but she does it.
Yeah. And I don't even necessarily think that it was supposed to be a male-female thing, although I'm sure that maybe somebody was trying to do that. But it didn't feel exactly like that. It felt more like you don't know who she is.
Right.
And at the time that she leaves, something really important comes over the radio. And this gentleman asks the other guy in the room, what are they saying? He's like, well, the only person who could tell us what they're saying, you just sent out to get a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
And I thought,
So good.
so good. Yeah. And actually, to his credit, later in the movie, she's busy doing her job, getting the interpretations, I think she's listening to German radio and
and television.
and the police reports, like a police scanner.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't know what
Yeah.
she was doing at that moment, but yeah, she did all
Yeah.
those things.
So she's doing all of that. And you see that gentleman that had previously sent her out to get his coffee without being asked. He just comes and sets a cup of coffee in front of her. I was like,
Yeah.
that was really nice.
That was cool.
Yeah. Like, I'm so sorry. I didn't know who you were.
Right.
So I loved that part. It was fun and respectful. And yeah, I liked it. It was his apology coffee.
Right. Apology coffee. Sometimes you got to do that.
Yeah.
I thought the German official that was interviewed by Jim McKay, much later, as they thought the police were kind of wrapping things up. That was crazy.
Yeah.
It was like, he said he thought the hostages were okay. They would be okay. He was vacillating between confidence and I think, but I'm optimistic. And you're just like, that's not how you give a news report on television. It was confusing, and I'm watching kind of, like, I don't know, especially when you kind of see later what actually happens and you think back, was he just trying to spin it?
Right. It made you nervous to listen to him.
It reminded me of something we saw a few years ago, I believe in Iraq, where troops were coming in, and then there was some kind of information officer that addressed the public and said, this is not happening, when it was clear that it was.
Yeah. You are not being bombed.
Like, somehow if I tell you what we wish was true, you'll just accept it and everything will be okay.
Right.
Like, that's the feeling I got from that. It was just weird. It was weird and uncomfortable.
Yeah. I did a little bit of reading because the movie doesn't really focus on the very end of the situation where the hostages get moved to the airport. The terrorists have demanded an airplane. There's a helicopter involved. When all of that happened, I think there's a possibility that at one point they did have those hostages secured.
Oh.
But then after that report, that it really wasn't like solid. Like, they were still giving reports during the middle of the event, and that they shouldn't have said that because it wasn't the end of the situation. Oh. And then after that, there was more fighting that happened, and they were all killed. So I don't think it was that, possibly that he wasn't just spinning it, but that they didn't have the full ending yet.
Okay. Well, so a lot of lessons learned.
Yeah. I think this whole movie is really about lessons, like, for today. I think we were talking earlier about, like, they had a responsibility to do their job, right? They're hired to cover the news. And now the news is unfolding right in front of them. And I really feel like they showed the struggle between what can we do? What should we do? And just because we can show this, is it respectful? Is it honorable? Should we show this?
Right.
Yeah.
There's a lot of ways to get the news out.
Right.
You can talk about it. You can talk about it super detailed. You can talk about it. There's all kinds of notches in there. Like, well, we're going to tell you, but we're not going to tell you all the gory details. Or you can do that if you think that's the right thing to do. And nowadays, especially, there's lots of different ways to get news. And there's some websites, some podcasts that are going to give you a lot more specifics. But in 1972, there was no internet. There was just basically 3 TV channels.
Right.
And this is how you get your news. And it was a different time. I mean, 50 years ago, people didn't want to know all the nitty gritty, really.
Right.
Like, yeah, it just wasn't the same. So,
I think it's still a good question for today because
I think you're right.
As far as live footage, any 5th grader with a cell phone can live stream any event he sees.
Yep.
And so, again, we all actually have to ask ourselves, should I be filming this? Should I film this or broadcast this live? Or, maybe you want to get the footage just so there's proof of a situation.
Yeah.
But then you have to be responsible for what you do with what you filmed.
Yeah.
And I think it's a huge question. I think we need to know what are our boundaries. And also, I felt like in the movie, they had a very high respect for life.
Yeah.
And since that time, 52 years later, we have had a rapid decline in respect for life.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I think that's true too.
So I think it's a good question.
Yeah. Yep. And we mentioned this in the preview, but that 27 years after the end of World War II, there are Jews being kidnapped and killed in Germany, and just the magnitude of all of that. So I guess you hear that a little bit from Marianne,
right?
She had a couple comments about how the German people don't want that on them, and maybe that explains a little bit the German official that was interviewed by Jim McKay, just really, really wanting this to end well, because the whole world's watching,
right,
and they didn't want the world to think of them as the Germans who still hate Jews. So yeah, that was crazy.
Did you talk about? We talked about when they interviewed the real Jeff Mason. Did you mention that?
Yeah, I mentioned John Magaro, the actor that played producer Jeff Mason, had spent a couple months studying how a sports room works. He also had the opportunity to interview Jeff Mason in preparation for the movie, and asked him, what was it like just to go through that whole experience? And one of the things the real Jeff told him was that when that day was over, they all went back to their hotel and cried.
Yeah. I'm sure it was one of those things where you find yourself in the trauma and there's no time. You just have to do your job, get through it.
Yep.
And then
be a professional.
We'll process this later.
But the magnitude of the event was not lost on them.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, so we talked about how much we loved it and also how heavy it was.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's something that really happened, and it was, we need to learn from history so we don't repeat it. And I think this movie does a good job of walking us through all of that.
Yeah, let's watch it again.
we will.
I want
sure
to.
We will.
It was so good.
I'm sure we will.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us. We also have a podcast where we talk about life and the pursuit of truth and all kinds of cool stuff. Check it out on our channel, The David and Hillary Show. Thank you for joining us for this movie post view. For now, we're David and Hillary.
The movie was September 5, and that's our post view.